Hello, everyone. This is Mark Longwell, Director of Alliances for the Cloud Platforms Business Unit at Red Hat. I'm based in Boston. I'm joined here today with Thomas Senn, the Chief Technologist and Business Leader for APJ for Networking and Communication Business at Intel, and Thomas is based in Singapore. Recently, Red Hat and Intel announced a CNF Certification Lab in New Mexico here in the United States, where we're bringing in partners to test CNF's cloud-native network functions on the latest Red Hat software called OpenShift Container Platform and the latest Intel Cascade Lake hardware. So Thomas, it's a nice venture that we put together in New Mexico. Maybe tell us a little bit about the why and the vision of Intel and Red Hat teamed up for this lab in New Mexico.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. No, I think I think the reason is really that we got a lot of feedback from operator about the complexity, and it's after a few years now running onboarding. We see there's really a need to help our partner, our application vendor, but also the comm service provider, to give a platform, an environment, where they can test out their services. And it's really, end of the day, it's really to a little bit lower, the time to market, and that impact, of course, then also the cost. But it's really, why everybody has to do the same work in every place in the world. Why do we have that to do multiple time? So I think that's really definitely something where we see a huge benefit and getting very positive feedback. The other part is also, if you are able as a telco operator to bring up these kind of services, onboarding that faster, it's also easier for you to create new services. And end of the day, new services means also creating revenue, or at least have an opportunity, to change the market where you are. So I think that's really the key thing, what we want to do. And then, of course, from a Intel Red Hat OpenShift point of view, I think we want to make sure, that they run on the latest hardware and making sure, that all the support and that stuff is really up to date. So I think in a nutshell, is really, I would summarize it, really time to market. Don't do the work 5 times in the world and everybody is struggling around it. Let's do that jointly and leverage that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one of the things that we found with some of the initial testing that we've done with some of our partners is each partner will look to leverage Intel hardware and features of OpenShift in a different way. And giving them this sandbox, let's call it, the certification lab in New Mexico, a chance to test out things in a non-production environment and see what works, what doesn't work, see where the issues may be that may need to be corrected before they go into production use at the service provider is invaluable. And just based off what we've worked on over the last 4 or 5 months with our initial set of partners, we've seen partners come in and just not fully understand the capabilities of what they could do with their software on OpenShift and Intel hardware. And that's been one of the pleasing things that I think we've seen is they've come out with a better understanding of how more efficient their software can be, right? By working with Intel, by working with Red Hat in this lab. And that only benefits the service providers in the long run, right? We're trying to provide them more services. And as you mentioned, quicker time to market, lower downtime, etc. Another point that we've been able to work on is test multiple CNFs, right? So not just a single CNF on top of Intel hardware, on top of OpenShift, but multiple CNFs working together, a more, I'd say, realistic type workload for a service provider. So maybe, Thomas, you can expand just a little bit on the importance of that capability that the lab provides and why service providers and vendors may see that as an important capability or a functionality that we can work on with them in the lab.
Yeah, I mean, I really like your sandbox approach. I think that's really the right things to bring it up, because I think in the end, yes, of course, every customer, we hear that all the time, every operator has a little bit of different configuration. However, there's a common base, as you said, one is the OpenShift, one is our infrastructure play, and even you have a subset of configuration, which is maybe very, very custom, specific. At least you can test, I would say 80-90%, and get the basics done. And I think that's massive if you don't have to do that all the time in your own lab. So at least you have a certain level of pre-tested, pre-integrated assurance. You get a kind of a script or a guidance, how to install and how to run that. So I think that's really the piece. It's not, just to be clear, it's not that you can run that in a product environment from the moment after this testing stuff. So I think definitely again bring stuff faster to the market. The other part is, yes, you can run multiple. You can get a kind of a mixed workload also on the lab, and really getting multiple of them tested in parallel, which gives you also again an environment where you can test out different type of workload, and gives you some indicator about how does it really work in a lab environment, but also gives you some indicator from a sizing parameter in how that would look like in a production environment. The other part, what is also important, what we do jointly together, is bringing the CNTT. So we are not doing testing and hide, do black box testing or anything. Everything is open, and we want to really run it very, very close with a CNTT standard on the testing part, so that people can leverage the testing and really getting a kind of an industry standard, an open industry standard, where we want to leverage that knowledge, how we test the stuff, so that people can do regression tests everywhere, where they are. So I think it's really, sometimes people feel that's a vendor lock-in or anything like that, but that's not really the things what we want to achieve. The achieve is really, we want to help the ecosystem, help the industry, getting an open testing environment, which we believe will again help to be faster to the market, and also help that not everybody has to do the same mistake or the same challenges all the time. And when you talk to CTOs, the setting up and starting a test environment is normally just getting the things up and running. We talk about 4-6 weeks easily. And I think that's definitely something we can achieve.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Something we learned working with Intel doing virtualized network functions was one of the barriers to do testing was partners may not have had their own lab set up, right? So by offering this certification lab and working with Red Hat and Intel to get in the queue, so to speak, it removes a barrier for partners to do testing with Intel and Red Hat, where we had a little bit of a barrier before. On the VNF side, we don't have that, or we've reduced that, let's say, on the container side, right? Working with, or on the CNF side, working with Intel. Another byproduct that I found, just thinking about over the last couple of months, is when Intel and Red Hat initially went into this, our main focus was bringing a CNF partner into the lab, doing a certain amount of testing, passing those tests, creating a CNF certification, and it gets listed on the Red Hat site. We move that partner out and bring another partner in, and kind of rinse and repeat kind of thing. What we didn't anticipate, and is happening now, is we've had service providers come to us and say, we like what you're doing. We want to replicate the bill of materials you have in New Mexico, and we want to replicate that testing environment on our site and work with you in your tests with Intel and Red Hat with CNF vendors in our labs and do even further testing. So this has been, I would say, an added benefit, something we didn't even consider 6 to 8 months ago when we were putting this program together, that there might be this interest, let's say, from service providers to take what we're doing and replicate it internally, which is a great benefit to these people, right? Because they're leveraging the testing that we're doing, the testing that we are creating jointly, Red Hat and Intel. As you mentioned, working through CNTT and leveraging some of that open source material, as you said, Thomas. So this is a really nice side benefit, and it was an unanticipated benefit for our service provider customers. We're doing with multiple folks right now who are just pleased as punch that they can work with us, but do it on their own terms, in their own lab, at their own pace. This is a really nice side benefit. So any comments on that would be great.
Yeah, no, again, I think, as you said, I think we didn't really think deep on that side, and I think that shows, the interest in the industry to do that. And again, I think the leverage for the comm service provider is, they can leverage the test script, they can leverage, the different partner that we bring in. And run that on very, very specific, which is maybe a little bit, again, as I said before, the labs are not 100% copy the same as we have set up. And I think that doesn't matter end of the day. They can at least leverage the test script, they can leverage, the same test tools. So they get a broader ecosystem and checking out things in a much earlier stage. Then they could do that without that type of environment. And I think that helps. And I think, the vision, if you ask me personally, I think the vision should be that, everybody should really leverage that lab or that lab approach, because I think that would help us in the industry, and it would make it easier, and there is nothing, people would getting, I don't see any negative sides of that. I think it's really help everybody. It helps the ecosystem partner, the application vendor, because I think it's it demonstrates, that we work with them close together, and it will help the operator that they have at least, again, very high tested from the things is working and useful for them too. So again, I think it's a really a great thing, and I think at least what I see the pipeline, for the New Mexico lab, it's full. So I think I think it's a good sign, and really we reach out, to everybody, application vendors or comm service provider who are interested, reach out either direct to you or to Red Hat, or happy to to bring that into that. So really keep the the driving point and the role bowling.
Yeah, and those are all good points. And one of the things that Intel has promised is to continue updating the lab, as Red Hat does also with the latest hardware and software, right? So as it becomes available from Intel, as it becomes available from Red Hat, the labs will have the latest state-of-the-art hardware and software, which is great. And I think just a point to make for our listeners here is that getting access to the lab, there is no cost associated with it. It's basically working with your Intel rep and your Red Hat rep to get into the queue, so to speak, and then obviously get scheduled into the lab in New Mexico. Obviously, with everything going on in the world today, everything is virtual that we're doing at this point. There have been discussions about potentially creating other labs, i.e. other physical labs, to expand our scalability. So we'll keep our listeners up to date there. But, just as a quick recap, this has been great. I think the relationship and the partnership between Intel and Red Hat's been going on, 15, 20 years. This is just another great joint effort that is benefiting our mutual customers. And for anyone who's interested in listening and wants to get further information, it's probably just best to contact me. It's just at mlongwell with one L at redhat.com. And Thomas, I'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon and the partnership with Intel. This has been super, and we look forward to continued success. And with that, thanks everyone for listening, and have a good afternoon or good evening. Thank you.